Today, I'm making a Crumbl chocolate chip copycat recipe made with fresh milled flour. Welcome to White Shadow Fare. Make it homemade and make it with love. I'm starting by grinding my soft white wheat berries. Cookies don't need hard white wheat. They need soft white wheat for a better texture. Hard wheats are for yeasted breads, whereas soft wheats are for things like pastries, cookies, and cakes. In total, I added 684 grams of soft white wheat berries to my mill, and that's how much I will need for this recipe, or about 4.5 cups. Now, I've never eaten a Crumbl cookie, but my granddaughter saw somebody with one at the store the other day and wanted one of those large cookies, so I found a recipe and adapted it to fresh milled flour. To get started, I'm measuring out 3/4 of a cup, or 173 grams, of sugar. I'm using cane sugar. It's just slightly less processed, but white sugar will work as well. If you're like me and you've never had one of these giant Crumbl cookies, they're kind of all the rage lately. We have a Crumbl cookie near us, and sometimes the lines are out the door. At this point, I'm going to add 1.5 cups, or 369 grams, of brown sugar, and I'm just measuring this out to make sure I get it exactly. I actually prefer my recipes to be written in grams. That way I know that everything is going to come out exactly right. But if you're using cups, this would be a packed brown sugar. Now, at the price that Crumbl is charging for each one of their cookies, I thought there is absolutely no way I'm buying this 5-year-old one of these expensive cookies. I'm going to make these at home, and probably for the same price, I was able to make a lot of cookies versus just one. Now, because I'm watching my calories, it may have been better for me to just buy that expensive cookie, but that's not what I did. I made them, and they did come out quite tasty. Next, I'm adding 2 room temperature eggs. I'm going to crack them separately into the bowl and make sure I don't get any shells in there. And lately, I've gotten a couple of bad eggs, so that's another reason to break the egg into a separate bowl before adding it to your mixture. And I went ahead and added 1.5 tablespoons, or 20 grams of vanilla extract to one of the eggs, because I'm going to be adding the liquid ingredients all at one time. I normally would use a hand beater and a regular mixing bowl to make cookies, but after looking at the ingredients, I felt this was going to be a very thick batter, so I did pull out my big mixer for this one. Into the mixing bowl, I added 1.5 cups, or 333 grams of soft butter. Make sure your butter is extremely soft. Make sure you've grabbed a spatula and get mixing that butter to soften it up even more before you add your sugars. Once you have that done, go ahead and add your sugars slowly and cream them together for 3 minutes. Now, this might seem like a long time to mix the sugar and the butter, but you are looking for it to make a color change, so from a darker color to a light fluffy color, and what it's actually doing is melting the sugar so you can't feel the sugar crystals in the cookie at all. Now, slowly over time, you will start to see that it has made a change in color, and you do need to stop the mixer every once in a while and scrape down the mixer so that you get all of the butter and the sugar well combined. Now, Crumbl Cookie has quite a following, and it is my understanding that every week they change the cookie flavors that they have. So the chocolate chip cookie flavor is just one of them, and they usually use a milk chocolate chip from what I can read online. Once again, I've never eaten there. It's just too expensive for my liking. At this point, you can see that we are starting to turn to that lighter color, and our mixture is getting a little bit fluffier, which is the exact texture that we're looking for. Continue scraping down the sides often and get everything incorporated the correct way, and you'll have a great cookie at the end. Not every cookie lends itself to being made with fresh milled flour without there being a textural change, but chocolate chip cookies come out wonderfully with fresh milled flour. And since I decided to bake these for my 5-year-old granddaughter, I figured a chocolate chip cookie was the most basic, and I know that she likes them, so we would start there. I'm getting really close to that 3-minute mark. I actually did time it out. I figured there was a reason they put 3 minutes in bold print on the 3 different recipes that I read. They all said 3 minutes, so that's what I went with. Crumbl Cookie started in 2017 in Utah, and it is already up to 1,000 stores across the United States. So if you don't have one near you now, you probably will in the near future. I'd actually like to see this brand have their own form of a fresh milled flour cookie. I think that would be interesting, and it certainly would be healthier for their customers. Now to your butter and sugar mixture, you're going to add your eggs. Add them one at a time. Let them completely mix in, and don't forget you have the one egg that has the vanilla added to it as well. After you have added both eggs and the vanilla and it's mixed in, you're going to add 1 teaspoon or 6 grams of salt, 1.5 teaspoons or 7 grams of baking powder, and 2 teaspoons or 9 grams of baking soda. I know most recipes are going to call for you to mix the dry ingredients, but I feel like the salt, the baking powder, and the baking soda get mixed in better when you add them in right at the beginning before you add your flour. So now we have our wet ingredients, which are our eggs, our butter, and our sugar. They're considered wet ingredients because the sugar does melt. And then we have our leavening agents, which is the salt, the baking soda, and the baking powder. And it's time to add that flour that we milled earlier. We're going to slowly add that to the mix, and this is going to become quite thick. At this point, I became quite happy that I used my bigger mixer because it needed a lot of power. Now, I like to indulge in cookies just like anybody else, but I have to say that since I've been making fresh milled flour goodies, I realize that when I'm indulging in something, I can also have healthy parts too. So when I'm using fresh milled flour, I'm getting those 40 out of the 44 main nutrients into my system. It's certainly better, not great, but better than most options when I'm eating a dessert. As you can see here, my batter is getting quite thick and it would bog down a hand mixer. So the story has it that around 1930, the original Toll House cookie was invented. And so almost 100 years of eating this cookie, and it is by far America's favorite sweet treat cookie. I remember as a kid, my mother buying the chocolate chip cookies by those little elves, and we thought that they were great, but there is nothing compared to a homemade cookie. And when I have one of those store-bought pre-packaged cookies now, I can feel the chemicals and processing in it. America's Test Kitchen tested different chocolate chips, and these Ghirardelli 60% cacao chips rated as their #1, and I've been using them ever since, and I have to say it does make a huge difference. Less sweet is actually good for my adult palate. Now, maybe as a kid I might not think that the darker chocolate tasted better, but my granddaughter seems to love them. So to your batter, you are going to mix in 400 grams or 2 cups of chocolate chips of your choosing. My understanding is that Crumbl Cookie uses a milk chocolate chip, which for me, that would be way too sweet. I am using these 60% cacao chocolate chips. If you want to be true to the copycat recipe, go for the milk chocolate. As with all fresh milled flour, it needs time to hydrate, so I do not preheat my oven until after I've already had my cookie batter made, and I give it 15 minutes of hydrating before I start to bake. So go ahead and preheat to 375 degrees Fahrenheit, 190 degrees Celsius, and wait for 15 minutes before you form these into cookies. Now the recipe wanted me to make half-cup cookies because the Crumbl cookies are so big. So I did spray the inside of a half cup and gave that one a try, looked at it and thought, that is enormous. So I dropped down to 1/4 of a cup for the other cookies, and they still were much bigger, but that's what I stuck with, was the 1/4 of a cup. So I did make one that was a half cup big so that you can see how absolutely enormous those cookies are. And I also had just purchased a cookie scoop that made about 1/4 of a cup, so that's what I used on my following trays. And so you will see that those cookies, I didn't roll them in my hand, so they're not as smooth. And I added a couple of chocolate chips to the top of the cookies just for looks. This copycat recipe was fun to make. It's always fun to try something new. They're chocolate chip cookies, so they really did taste wonderful. I would say it's a thicker batter, and that is the main difference, so it doesn't spread out so much. But according to the website, at $43.99 for a dozen cookies, I'm going to be making my own, and I hope you will too. Give these a try and let me know how they taste down below. Thank you for joining me at White Shadow Fare.